You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, and then you read. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive, who had ever been alive. James Baldwin. Thanks for tuning into this video. My name is Jaidyn, I'm an author and a poet living in Melbourne, and I hope to make more videos of my adventures as a writer navigating the world. This time I'm taking you to Clunes, a small country town in Victoria, which holds an annual booktown festival celebrating books and literature. This is an opportunity for independent authors to meet readers and sell their books. For booksellers to circulate new and old books, even rare books, and a chance to provide an economic boost for a small country town. I was heading to Clunes to sell my own book, The Street Poet.
Holy shit. That is a lot of books.
This is how it all went down. We left Melbourne around lunchtime on the Friday. As usual, I travelled in company. I like to drag my collective of writers along with me for moral support when I go on my missions. Back in February, we released the second issue of our paper punk zine, so this was a chance for us to sell some of our zines as well. We haven't been to Booktown since 2022, and the last time we were only there as browsers, shoppers, book lovers. We're finally beginning to publish our work and make it as writers. As a writer, the experience at Booktown is somewhat different. I think events like Booktown are great motivators for writers to get their work out there, and I hope my friends can have more of their own published works available at these book festivals in the near future. First, we reached Clunes, where I found the marquee I would be stationed in with my stall for the weekend. I dropped off my books so I wouldn't have to carry them in the morning. Here I met Andrea and her husband Simon, who assured me they would take care of my books and make sure my table and chairs were allocated to me, since we had to head to Ballarat to check into our motel. We got sidelined in town by an elderly lady on a scooter sitting outside the grocery store. She spoke to us of outsiders entering Clunes during Booktown. She said it only happened usually once a year, and for the rest of the year it was mostly just the locals in town. She called me exotic for my Mediterranean heritage, which was a little strange and totally something a woman who had lived in the same town for 51 years would say. Then we drove to Ballarat to check into our motel where we would be staying for the weekend. I had an ulterior motive in Ballarat. You may have seen my previous vlog in which I ventured on a road trip along the Great Ocean Road to post 1,000 of my poems. I plan to do something similar in Ballarat to continue my series of street poetry tours. I spent 5 hours on Friday night wandering up and down the centre of Ballarat, using a map to mark my locations street by street until I had posted hundreds of poems. I will cover this in a separate video. I was up bright and early on Saturday. I'm not a morning person, preferring the darkness in which I thrive and create. But the Booktown Festival started at 9 AM sharp, and I still had to set my stall up. I sculled a hot coffee and got ready to head out. It was a frosty morning, and I spent the whole trip shooting glances at the clock to make sure I didn't arrive late. People were setting up their stalls when I arrived. I found my marquee where Andrea and her husband were there, all set up for a long day ahead. I hadn't even finished setting up my own stall before the first trickle of readers entered our marquee. I was grumpy because my Square reader wouldn't connect to my phone because I don't get service out in the country. Andrea bought me a coffee, for which I am extremely grateful, and the day commenced. It was a quiet morning. Lots of people wandered over to my stall to browse, picking up my book and flicking through the pages, listening to me talk about my writing. But I wasn't really expecting people to buy my book right off the bat, because there's still a whole festival to explore. And besides, I was still having issues with my square. But then Maddie and Camille came to the rescue, and I borrowed Camille's phone, which solved my square conundrum. The sales started flying after this, and I was so overwhelmed and yet ecstatic to be meeting so many new faces and sharing my poetry with them. It felt good to be surrounded by other readers and writers, people who understood the pleasure of picking up a book and discovering a world alike or quite unlike our own. People who turn to books for all kinds of reasons: wisdom, entertainment, comfort. I didn't get a chance to see much of the festival on the first day because I was stuck at my stall, but I did send Camille around to capture moments from the day.
Clunes Booktown Festival started in 2007, and we've had one every year since, except of course 2020 and 2021. We have always had about 70 booksellers turn up. There's a kids area, entertainment, lots of food, which we're right near at the moment. And unfortunately you can't smell what we can smell. I'm here for the Clunes Museum. We have a stall, we have some publications that we sell each year, which helps us fund restoration work which we might be doing on some of our collection.
I'm currently doing charters, and this is my third poetry book, She's Not Normal. And I guess it's divided into different chapters or different ways that a person can feel like they're not normal, like in their relationship, politically, for their views. Me, as a daughter of migrants living in Australia, also as a mother living in Australia, and the way it is here and things that are considered not normal.
I'm Lachlan, I'm a local writer and I write locally set speculative fiction about small town life in the face of difficulties.
Occasionally one of my DeGrave Circle friends would show up and rest at my stall, or sit in place of me so I could wander around and meet some of the other independent authors in the marquees. This was dangerous. The more authors I spoke with, the more books I ended up buying. I returned to my stall with 11 new books, all by indie authors. But I have zero regrets, of course, because supporting indie authors is massively important to me. I got to meet so many new faces, and some old faces too. At some point, Coralie Dimitriadis found me. Things settled down around 4 PM when people were starting to leave the festival site. I signed a few more books, but mostly I just read my own book, Nausea. It's a little humiliating being an author and having to describe my own work, pitching myself to readers. But as authors, we need to overcome this feeling of humiliation because we need to engage with communities in order to allow new readers to discover our works. We can't just be lonely and isolated, too shy to talk about ourselves. But I understand why someone would romanticize the mysterious nature of this kind of writer who hides in the shadows. But this is not the reality of being an author. The hard work is done here, on the ground, trying not to bother people too much, but still trying to earn our bread and butter.
Funny place name, isn't it? Clunes.
At 5 p.m. I packed away my things and left the festival to return to Ballarat. Some of my friends stayed behind to attend a poetry slam event, but I was too socially drained for this. I still had another day of stall holding ahead of me. Some of us headed to Irish Murphy's, a pub in Ballarat, for some traditional grub and drinks. The drinks continued when we reconvened with the rest of the gang in someone's living room. The house was full of quirky furniture and odd features, like a clock that chimed 15 minutes to the hour and teapots stacked in the garden. We drank more wine than we probably should have, and wine makes me want to tell stories. We spent hours this way, telling stories and laughing into the night before the sudden urge to write poetry arrived. We sat around a coffee table, writing poetry and making art before sharing that poetry and art with each other. We even came up with a theme for the next issue of our paper punk zine, which I'm not sure was a good idea while we were drinking wine, but we'll deal with that later. And then, feeling we had just about overstayed our welcome in this living room, departed for our motels. On Sunday, I struggled to wake up. I was groggy and sore, and I had a splitting headache, the aftershock of a night of poetry and wine. I wasn't sure how I was going to make it through the 8 hours of the last day of the Booktown festival, but I had to try. When we got to Clunes, I immediately bought myself an emergency coffee, painkillers, and a can of Red Bull. Not the ideal remedy for a hangover, but I had to set up my stall, so time was against me and I still had this splitting headache. I set up my stall, laughing with Andrea about my hangover, and the second day of the Booktown festival officially began. I got to meet Jeffrey, a 91-year-old author, composer, musician, and music educator who had several of his books about his music and adventures for sale. He played various instruments, serenading authors and readers alike as they trailed in and out of our marquee. I bought his CD, even though I no longer have a CD player. I have an excuse to buy one now. This day was quieter than the first day. The festival wasn't as busy, and people had probably reached their book buying limits, or so some of us indie authors theorized. I had plenty of time to bond with these authors and wander the marquees to buy more books. I browsed the stands and stalls, serpentining through rows of rare editions and ex-library books. My arms were growing heavy with books. I was like a bird, looking for twigs with which to build a sturdy nest. I think I bought 40 books in total at the festival, some of which were classics, others out-of-print young adult thrillers from the 90s, which is a style or genre of book that I've been drawn to lately. I bought a total of 17 books by independent authors at the festival, all of which I'm very keen to read.
additional camera.
Oh, very nice.
$160.
My goodness. The day concluded at 4 p.m, and since this was the second and final day of the festival, I had to pack my table away, box up all my books, and say goodbye to all the wonderful people I had met. In just a few hours, I would be back home, sitting in my lounge room, exhausted from the tour. I had to prolong the fun, so I wandered the now deserted town and left my poetry here and there for people to stumble across. My parting gift for the small country town of Clunes, place I used to come to as a teenager, with big dreams and a budding passion for literature, and now, as an adult, as an author, as a street poet. I had such an epic time at the Clunes Booktown Festival this year. Festivals like this are important. They provide opportunities for booksellers and authors, for literacy and reading and literature as a whole. The town of Clunes is on the map, as they say, because of festivals like these, and I'm sure some of the locals feel the impact of that. If you live in Australia, I highly recommend you attend next year's Booktown Festival. It's totally worth it. You might even see me there. Thanks again for tuning in. I like making these videos because I get to scratch the itch that is my wider creative urges, beyond writing and poetry. Film, audio and design. I guess I'm trying to become more of a multidisciplined artist. I really want to get this channel going again, so all help is greatly appreciated. Please share this video with your friends to encourage them to come to Booktown next year or to find similar festivals closer to you. I have a new video dropping soon, so stick around.